Peanut Gallery is being very noisy today, telling me what to do. We're going to go ahead and start the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations. Welcome to our conferees and everyone else who's here. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to come. We will go ahead and start with approval of minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? And does anyone have any questions or changes?
Move to approve.
Representative Sutton made a motion to approve the minutes. Could I have a second? Representative, oh God, Senator Francisco. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Motion.
Aye.
And then we have Senator Faust-Godot and we have Senator Mike Thompson online. So thank you, both of you senators, for being here. Then we will go ahead and just jump right into the deep end, and I will welcome the administrator of the Agricultural Remediation Board, Randy Stuckey, as well as Jamie Lecker, who is Syngenta's board chair. So, Jamie, come on up, or I think Randy's skipping out on being. We will, please be available for questions, Mr. Stuckey. Okay, welcome to committee.
And Special Chemical Remediation Act. The Act created the Agriculture Remediation Reimbursement Program and Agriculture Chemical and Remediation Fund. The Act also established the Kansas Agriculture Remediation Board to administer the program and fund. The Kansas Agriculture Remediation Fund and program reimburse eligible parties for costs incurred while cleaning up agriculture chemicals from their facilities. For more than 23 years, this program has helped protect and clean up soil and water in our state. The program is appreciated by Kansas agribusiness, rural Kansans, and the state and federal regulators. The program is 100% financed by annual environmental assessments on commercial grain elevators, ag chemical product registrants, chemical fertilizer product registrants, custom fertilizer blenders, and pesticide dealers. No general funds from the state are used for this program. In order to be eligible to receive from the fund, applicants must have first paid into the fund. To be reimbursed, the remediation activities conducted must be approved or directed by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and the expenses cannot be covered by insurance. The program is administered by a 7-member appointed volunteer board, which meets quarterly to approve and review those applicants to the program and approve the disbursement of those funds. I serve as the appointed chair for that board. In 2024, through passage of House Bill 2477, the legislature increased the total amount of eligible parties can be reimbursed from $200,000 to $300,000. This change was really important because the cost of remediating these particular sites has increased significantly over the years. The proposed change to the regulation merely makes the regulation consistent with the updated statute. The fund balance is currently around $1.7 million. So while the proposed regulation change will not increase the cost on industry, it will allow for additional remediation projects to be completed. Thank you for the time today, and I'll take any questions as necessary, along with Mr. Stuckey.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Jamie?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you. What is the amount paid into the program to participate, and is that a yearly payment due?
Yeah, and Randy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's $1,000 annually into the to the program.
Randy Stuckey, I serve as the contract administrator for the board, and there is $1,000 payment for those that that paid into the fund and then no longer retain a license that they would otherwise be paying into the fund so that they can continue to receive from the fund to, if they have an active remediation project. That's the $1,000. All the other categories, I think there's 5 other categories, it's delineated within the statute how much those folks would pay. So for a grain elevator, I think it's 2/5, I'm not gonna get this right. It's, you have to, it's for 1,000 bushels, it's 0.00225 cents per bushel, but it's a bushel fee, per bushel fee. It's a few $100s a year for the grain elevator, depending upon their bushel. And they pay this to the KDA, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and it is sent to the Treasury, who puts it into the fund, this Ag Chemical Remediation Fund. The pesticide dealers and fertilizer blenders, they pay a separate fee that's, again, set out in statute. And it's, I'd have to look, but it's not the $1,000, but there is that $1,000 category for those folks that no longer pay into the fund. They had maintained a license, but in order to stay in good standing, in order to apply for the fund, they can pay this $1,000 fee into the fund. So it varies across the different categories.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. So in conjunction with that, so if you have a license, it costs over 1,000 because 1,000 of it goes towards this, or am I hearing you incorrectly?
Wait, it's sort of, I mean, we're talking a little bit two separate things. So one is the folks that are actually taking use of the services. Another part is those, the industry partners. So for example, crop protection manufacturers will, there's fees assessed with the registration of their products as they get those registered in the state of Kansas, but we're not actively accessing it. It's more customers, retailers that are needing to access the funds. So it's multiple parts of the industry are paying into the fund in order to build it up for access to those then that need to access it.
Okay, and then is there a filing of how much everyone pays and how you decide that with all the different equations? Is that something transparent that we can pull up on the internet?
I'm trying to find it in the statute right now. I don't know if the staff can help me. It's
Representative Moyer.
Oh, I believe I found it. I think it's 23713,
sounds right.
and it has the formula for each of them. I don't know if I want to read all of it out.
No, you don't have to.
Point
but we
zero
can
zero
find it.
zero 25 per bushel of.
Okay, all right. You did good. You did good. Okay. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said this in your testimony, but I didn't write it down. What was the fee fund balance currently?
$1.7 million.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Real quick, I might speak to that. For many, many years, the fund was the fund was underfunded, meaning I think until 2019, I want to say, for about 10 years, applicants would submit their applications to the fund and potentially wait years to receive any reimbursement because there were more applications to the fund than there were money to pay out those applications. But during COVID, as in many other things, that work slowed down. The remediation work slowed down. The money was still going into the fund. And so we went from we had insufficient funds in the fund to having the balance grow a bit. So there is a cap. There's a $3 million cap, and that if it were to hit that $3 million, we don't think that it will. But if it did, then the KDA would measure that. I believe it's April 15th. I've had that date right. If it hits the $3 million at that date, all those fees would toll or stay until such time as it's paid down to, I believe, $1 million. So we had that put into the fund a couple of years ago.
Excellent. Thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say we had a good discussion about this in our Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee, but also we annually review the report from the Remediation Board. And I think I have the last 20 copies in my office if you'd like to see them.
Why is that not a surprise? I'm so impressed. Okay, Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Kind of along the same lines. So what's the sort of annual in and out? I mean, you guys, it's $1 million a year. It's how many projects get done in a year in the last couple of years? I mean, What's the financial?
Yeah, great question. All that's set out in the report to the governor and the ag committees every year, but historically, about $1 million has gone into the fund and out of the fund. Since COVID, it's pulled back a bit. It was down to like 550,000 in 2020, but last year we had, I want to say, just under 50 applications, right? And the total was just under $700,000. So still strong demand on the fund. And, you know, it's a great program, a great fund that only exists in 2 other states. But, you know, this is a bright shining star for the state of Kansas to be able to say that for ag, chemical, and grain industry sites that had this carbon tetrachloride fumigant issue and now nitrate in soil and groundwater, don't kid yourself. We've asked the regulators, and these issues, they are in all other Midwest states. But we have a fund to take care of it in the state of Kansas, and it's supported by industry, not just financially supported, but they support the policy behind it. And so we're really proud of the program in our state.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Anyone online? All right. Well, thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move on to Department of Health and Environment, Division of Environment, Bureau of Waste Management, and I see we have Daniel Vollen, attorney, Nick Schneider, program consultant, and Dylan Avery, attorney. Did I say all those right? Nope. Christine Menike from KDHE Waste Management is coming, and she's so excited to come here and testify. Sorry, it was down lower and I was just reading the red. Welcome to committee. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Chair Wasinger, and members of the committee. My name is Christine Menike. I'm the Technical Support Section Chief in the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Bureau of Waste Management. Thank you for the opportunity to present this proposed new regulation to you today. Coal combustion residuals, also known as CCR or coal ash, are produced when coal is burned to generate electricity at power plants. This CCR can contain mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, which can pollute surface water and groundwater if the coal ash or CCR is not properly managed. But some CCR is beneficially used, but most is disposed of in landfills or surface impoundments, also collectively known as CCR units, and these are issued permits by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. In 2015, in response to some catastrophic releases of CCR, EPA promulgated regulations to manage CCR and CCR units. Since then, they have promulgated additional regulations. Some have been adopted, some are still under development. And those include regulations for EPA to issue permits to these facilities unless the state is delegated authority to implement the program in lieu of EPA. The affected electrical power plants, the regulated community, asked KDHE to seek approval from EPA to implement the CCR program in lieu of EPA. And in 2022, they supported a bill amending KSA 653407 to increase their permit renewal fees. This increase provides KDHE the resources to develop and administer the CCR program. The statute sets a minimum permit renewal fee of $12,000 per year with a maximum of $16,000 per year. The $12,000 minimum applies until KDHE adopts a fee schedule, which is what we're doing with this proposed regulation. Proposed KAR 2829-2008 establishes the method to determine the permit renewal fee. The method is to take the cost of the program, the estimated cost of the program, divided by the number of units that are subject to the program or part of that program. So the costs would include the salary and benefits for staff implementing the CCR program, operational costs like computers, supplies, and rent related to those staff members, and agency indirects on those charges. I wanted to point out that the cost to implement the program is specified in reg as the annual cost to the department. So that means if we receive grants from EPA, that could reduce the amount or the cost to the program and thus reduce the annual fee for the facilities. In 2023, so this was after the statute went into effect, we did receive a grant from EPA. This grant, since we already were collecting the permit renewal fee, this grant will be spread over 7 years and will pay for costs that aren't covered by the permit renewal fee. So the permit renewal fee covers the cost for 1.5 staff people that are dedicated to this program. The grant will be used for equipment purchases, specialized software, database development, sampling and analysis costs, and staff who peripherally support the CCR program. So that's the top half of the equation. The bottom half of that equation is the number of units subject to the fee. And that would be the number of CCR landfills and CCR surface impoundments that are subject to the federal CCR regulations. And at this point, we've got 17 units in Kansas. The regulation also sets a minimum permit renewal fee of $500 per unit, which makes the minimum, the $12,000 minimum set in statute, obsolete. That's the way the statute reads, and it was confirmed by our legal staff that that's how it would work. Using 2024 estimates, we believe that each unit will pay approximately $9,000 per year rather than $12,000, saving each unit, the facilities $3,000 per unit, or a total of a little over $50,000 per year. The way the formula is set up, as costs increase, for example, due to inflation, salary increases, the permit renewal fee for the CCR units will also increase to cover those costs. As we were developing this regulation, we solicited input from the affected facility multiple times. They were provided drafts of the regulation, as well as the calculations we were using to determine the economic impact. The public hearing for this regulation will be held on Monday, May 19th at 10 o'clock a.m. Thank you for your time. I will now stand for questions.
All right, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I'm struggling a little bit to understand the gist of this. You're effectively reducing the fee because you got a federal grant to cover the cost. Am I understanding that correctly? And I'm looking here where you talk about, you know, $1,000 minimum to the $12,000 and $16,000, but you're going to be reducing that. Can you explain again where the cost savings are? Is that because of efficiency, or that's just a federal grant is covering the cost?
Not looking at the federal grant, we determined that we didn't need necessarily the $12,000 per year. So this is just, we have the formula, and based on our 2024 expenses, we don't need that $12,000. When the statute was written, we thought there were going to be, I think it was 14 units subject to the fee, and it ends up that there are actually 17 units subject to the fee. Also, our salary costs have decreased since we originally started working on this. So at this point, the grant is not lowering the fee because the grant is being used for other things, kind of peripheral things. But in the future, if we would get other grants from EPA, which we're not real hopeful of,
Okay.
but that could reduce the cost.
So then to restate it, that you had your initial fees that you set based on what you thought the expenses were going to be, but the actual expenses are less, and so you're adjusting the fees effectively downward and like that. Okay, very good.
Senator Thompson. Senator Thompson, did you have a question? Like a seance again. Are you here, Senator Thompson? We feel you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, there we go.
Can you hear me?
now.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, I'm just curious if the amount of CCR has actually gone down because of the coal plants. Some of the coal plants have less use. If you have any data on that, I'd be curious to know.
I know we have the data. I don't know if it offhand. I don't know, Heather, if you know.
Can you come from the podium, please? And introduce yourself so we know who we're talking to or listening to.
Hello, my name's Heather Merritt. I'm an engineer in Bureau of Waste Management. And so if I'm understanding the question correctly, we're asked if we've seen a decrease in the amount of disposal of coal ash?
Or the total amount of coal ash, whether, in other words, we've seen the kind of trend away from using coal generation. And I didn't know if the amount of coal ash has actually gone down or if they're still using the same amount or any information on that.
We do have tonnage information that comes into the Bureau that we could look at. We didn't bring it with us.
Perhaps you could just supply it to the committee through our staff.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Welcome. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on the senator's question, though, I think when it comes to the number of units, at one time you were around 14 units or so, and now you're at about 17. So it sounds like the number of units has increased with time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was maybe the interpretation of.
Try to move to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I think it was the interpretation of which units would be subject to the fee. And in our initial look at the federal regulations, we thought it would be 14. But then as we delved deeper, it ended up that there were actually 17 units.
And obviously, under this proposed formula, the more units there are, the less the charge to each unit.
Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Penn, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today, and I appreciate your presentation here. Looking down on page 8 of what you have, and I hope that translates to what the printout is, you have a table that has job class, salary, benefits, operations, subtotal. Do you see that little chart?
Yes.
With 4 bullet points under it? Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, my question to her is, you said that, and I applaud you on efficiencies. That's always a great thing. You said that this was because the amount of salary went down, and it says on bullet number 4 that the estimated fee, and I think you stated, is based on 2024 cost estimates and does not account for inflation. I guess my bigger question is, going forward, is this going to get revised up because you're going to do it again on 2025 actual costs and inflation from 24, 25, 26? As well as would salary and benefits go up? And what would be the impact of that? Would it be that you come back before the committee revising this? Is it going to include state funds at that juncture? What does that look like exactly?
We don't anticipate any state funds supporting the program. There aren't any now. So the way the formula is set up, the department uses that formula each year to determine the fee based on the number of facilities subject to the fee on May 1st. And then we present that fee or, invoice the facilities for the amount of that fee. So the way the regulation is set up, we don't anticipate having to come back. We would just keep using that formula.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? I have a few. I didn't want you to go home without doing something. What's the annual cost of your budget? What's the What is the cost? How much does it cost us to have this division within KDHE?
Just for CCR,
Uh-huh.
I believe for fiscal year 2024, it was $150,000 approximately.
And you said you had 1.5 numbers of staff people within your department. Is that correct?
Correct.
The other thing that made me a little nervous was that some of this goes to landfills. After you talked about how bad the items are in CCR, do they still anything still go to landfills?
I believe there is still coal ash going to landfills, but they are monitored. They have groundwater monitoring, and they have to meet certain design requirements. That's part of the federal reg. If they don't meet those design requirements, they were required to close.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the purpose of the federal regulations, to prevent escape from the surface impoundments and the landfills.
Sounds interesting. I'm not quite sure how you do that. You have everything else in a contained unit. You feel like that's so important. Why would you even allow it in a landfill?
Well, the landfill is contained. It has, and maybe Heather speak a little bit more to the design of the land.
From those of us who have been in county government, I can tell you a landfill is not contained.
The reason for the federal regulations was failure of surface impoundment dikes and berms. They caused a release of the liquid waste. It was catastrophic. In landfills, those are incised units and less at risk of release, like would happen in a surface impoundment. But these regulations, like Christine was saying, provide water protection through like a plastic and compacted soil. And so in addition to groundwater monitoring, it is protective. You mentioned release at maybe municipal solid waste landfills. This is an industrial type landfill where there's a single stream of waste coming into the facility and the facility manages it. It's not a litter issue.
Okay. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This really touches it somewhat indirectly, but with the advent of scrubbers and all the other new things that are being put on coal plants now, are we seeing a reduction in some of the heavy metals and such in the coal ash itself?
My impression is that the scrubbers are for the gas that's coming out,
Right.
rather than the coal ash itself. So, and I don't know the answer to whether the amount of contaminants in the coal ash has changed, but we can get you that answer.
I think that'd be really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? What was it, really painful?
It was better than
Better than you expected, okay. Told you you didn't have to worry about it. We're all the same.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got a very quiet committee today. That's why you started a meeting early. When you do it around lunchtime and they get a little hangry, then Katie bar the door.
Okay.
All right, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. All right, we'll move on then to the Department of Health and Environment Division of Public Health Radiation Control Program. All sorts of fun things today. We have Jason Meinhold, Radiation Program Director, and we also have Aaron Short, Health Physicist Supervisor, available for questions. All right, he's behind you. He's backing you up. All right, welcome to committee. Thanks for being here. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jason Meinhold. I'm the Radiation Control Program Director at the Department of Health and Environment. And I'm here today to present a package of regulatory updates that are essential to maintaining Kansas's status as an agreement state with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Kansas became an agreement state with the NRC effective January 1, 1965, and this agreement granted the state the authority for regulating certain radioactive materials under the oversight of the NRC. Kansas's regulatory compatibility is required by law, specifically in KSA 48-1601, to ensure compatibility with federal standards, to maintain an effective and integrated system of regulation within the state, and to align as closely as possible with other states' regulatory programs. The NRC, which oversees radiological and nuclear materials to ensure safety and security, requires that agreement states like Kansas adopt regulations that are compatible with those of the NRC within 3 years of their publication. This regulatory package addresses several key updates needed to ensure Kansas continues to meet the NRC's requirements. Of particular note in this package are updates regarding personnel monitoring devices, security of employee information, and various administrative corrections to ensure compliance with NRC regulations. First, 28-35-284 and 28-35-354 include updates to the regulations governing personnel monitoring devices, or PMDs. That's what measures individuals' radiation dose that they've received. Under these updates, certain Kansas licensees will now have the option to use PMDs that do not require laboratory processing. That means they can use instant reading monitoring devices, which allows them to access personnel dose more quickly rather than waiting for a monthly or quarterly report from a lab. So licensees will be able to maintain employees' dose data and better protect employees' health and safety. It's important to note that this update is not a requirement, rather it just allows this option. So even if there was an increase to instant reading dosimeters, they're certainly not required to make that change. It's optional based on if they want to do so. So if they do choose to use instant read monitoring devices, they will be required to evaluate these devices for proper function to ensure accurate readings. Another important update concerns the security of employee information, and this would be under 28-35-700, where we adopt an updated version of the federal regulations 10 CFR Part 37, which requires licensees to keep sensitive information or sensitive employee information secure. So this section in particular pertains to employees that have been granted unescorted access to radioactive materials that pose substantial risks to public health and safety. So under Part 37, those are very dangerous radioactive sources. So the NRC updated security information to make sure that those particular devices are secure. In addition to that security measure, they're also updating contact points with the NRC for event notifications, background checks, training document submissions, and other administrative communications. And the remaining updates in this package are largely administrative in nature, focusing on correcting errors in the regulations, including correcting formulas and isotope activity levels to ensure accurate and consistent regulatory standards. And several points of contact with the NRC have also been updated, and those changes are expected to have no significant impact. These updates are required for Kansas to maintain compatibility with NRC regulations. And by making these necessary changes, Kansas will continue to uphold its commitment to ensuring safe use of radiological materials while also supporting the efficient operation of our regulatory system. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, committee, do you have any questions for Jason? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just, for sake of clarification, the only place this would apply to is at the Wolf Creek power plant, is that correct?
No, in fact, we have no regulatory authority over Wolf Creek. The NRC maintains sole regulatory authority over commercial power reactors. The scope and scale of the materials that they have at the nuclear power plant are much more significant than what we deal with. These are industries such as medical licensees that use nuclear medicine, industrial radiographers that use radioactive sources to do non-destructive testing, things of that nature, many others, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. You probably don't have the answer to this, and it's something very small. On 2835-189A, you went from nuclear waste means to shall mean. And believe me, in the legislature, we hear all the time, we're not going to say shall mean, we're going to say means. What, do you have any idea why that was changed?
So whenever we open up our regulations, the editor has a tendency to go in and modify language to how they feel that it should be. So these are not suggested, when you're talking about the verbiage of it, they typically aren't our recommendations. Okay. It's typically done by those that review them outside of our control.
Okay. Representative Wagner.
Okay, thank you. Your answer to my first question leads to another. So as far as the aspect about transportation of nuclear waste, this is not Wolf Creek. This is just from radiologic labs nuclear waste. Is that what that would reference?
No, so the 189, that's advanced notification of any waste shipment, including special nuclear material. The state does receive notification from those high-level packages, and it's simply updating some regulatory references to the federal DOT regs in that.
So in the state of Kansas, how much nuclear waste goes in and out of the state? I mean, if you can elaborate, I'm curious now.
So I don't actually have that information. I can certainly supply that to you, but I do want to note that our department is not the contact for waste shipments in the state. It is the Division of Emergency Management who receives those as the emergency response agency, because the purpose of those notifications is to be prepared if something were to happen. So I can certainly contact them and get more definitive numbers for the committee if you'd like.
That would be okay. I just wanted a general lay of the land on that, but thanks for the clarification.
All right, does anyone else have a question? This committee's very asleep. All right.
Easy on me, thank you.
Thank you for being here. All right, well, that concludes our items on the agenda. We now move on to committee discussion and comments on proposed rules and regulations. Does anyone have a comment or something they want to add to the record? Again, calling once, twice. Anyone online? Okay. If not, then I would take, I don't know, if we need, do we need a motion to finish discussion, or, because there's nothing we're adding. All right. Well, if that's it, and we don't have anything else before the committee, going once, twice, three. Well, with the next one. Sorry, I always forget about that. Well, we have no current sets of regulations out, so we don't even have a need to set the next meeting, but I have no fear that either Jordan or Jill will do something. You just hear rumors. Okay, as soon as you hear something a little bit stronger than a rumor, why don't you email the committee and then we'll take care of that. How about that? All right. Yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Jill had put together a really good spreadsheet for us, and it had showed dates of when legislation had passed, and we have some departments or agencies that lag. Kind of heard that a little bit today, that the law passed and then it takes them more than a year. Years, yes, thank you. And I was just wondering if any of that's hanging out there that we might lean on a little bit to get them to move forward on those regulations.
If we would just leave that to Jill Shelley. Thank you, ma'am.
Madam Chair, members. Jill Shelley, KLRD. I am working on updating that, and I can expedite that and get that out to the committee if you would like.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because this business of having a law passed and then taking a couple of years, maybe 3, before they decide to change their regulations may be a real problem. So, all right, is Representative Wagner.
Since we have a little bit of time on kind of a similar note, if we're rules and regs, how come we have so few regulations actually show up before us? I mean, I'm just a little surprised, as we passed 116 bills last year, and just we get you know, I don't know, I mean, do we have in the course of a year, 20 presentations? Is there some cutoff that, you know, again, I've been on the committee a while, and I still don't quite understand why surely there's more regulations being issued by the state of Kansas than what comes before this committee. There's not, really? Okay.
Being
I'm
one of the
shocked.
most regulated
I'm
states in the
impressed.
nation,
Yeah, well,
that's pretty interesting.
Okay, so actually, any rule change in the state does show up before us. Okay, well,
Uh, uh, Madam Shelley.
Jill Shelley, KLRD. We're as surprised by not seeing more come through as you are. I do not know where things are in the pipeline. I know that there are additional requirements for rules and regulations in the statutes that surely agencies are addressing, but I don't know where those efforts are.
I mean, again, if I may, Madam Chairman, I mean, there's so many bills that we pass, like, well, the details, you know, rules and regs, you know, it'll be, the regulations will clarify it or whatever, and again, it's just, I mean, I'm just, I guess, maybe pleased or hopeful that we're really getting everything that we're supposed to, you know, statutorily. Thank you.
Is there a way to do a search of every statute or just shall prepare rules and regulations that we could make a list every year of who should be doing this? When should they be doing this?
If I may again, the annual JCAR report does include a section each year on what has been enacted. We have historical data for that. Well, we retain those reports. I think it's back to 2014, 2012, perhaps. So, but as to a comprehensive list of all the rules and reg authority in the statutes, we do not have that.
Okay.
I have a question. I think we can note that the Agricultural Remediation Board worked promptly on that regulation. And sometimes when we refer to rules and regulations, those regulations already exist. So we only see it when there's a change. And I think we're seeing some good suggestions like the permitting for the Department of Health and Environment on CCRs, because they've put that in regulation in a way that we won't have to come back and look at that change in the fee, because it's already part of that formula that they're adopting. So as much as we can do that, I think it's helpful to this committee and to the state.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman. I appreciate the good senators' comments. However, I would tend to go the other way because part of the times we don't even know what the agencies and departments are up to until the rules and regs come before us. And so they've found a loophole to make changes or to write them vaguely enough that they don't have to come before this committee as often. The Department of Agriculture is probably one of the most regent aggressive on this. And I just lean the other way because how do we have the oversight otherwise? So thank you, Madam Chairman and Senator.
Okay. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to contribute to this discussion and also to prove that I'm actually here today and listening.
Otherwise, we wouldn't even know that you were here.
That's right.
That's true.
That's right. But of course, an alternative explanation might be that perhaps the so-called administrative state is neither as large nor as burdensome as some suppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, but we all know that that's not true because we can add that up. We can add that up and compare it to other states.
Honestly, I don't know that that is not true. I tend to think that we have a rather reasonable regulatory regimen in this state that balances the competing interests. And so not to make too much fun of it, but I don't necessarily agree with that proposition. Thank you.
I wonder if research could look up the number of employees that we have within departments compared to other states, showing the difference of size of state, number of employees, et cetera. So I'd love to see that as well. Is there any other question here before us? One thing, and that was suggested to me, was should we include a request for data in the report about rules and regs? Is that something that the committee feels comfortable? Data in the report in terms of what bills required rules and regs, who hasn't done it, what has been out there that they were supposed to supply rules and regs and haven't done. That's what I'm thinking. I'm sorry, Jordan. Jordan really meant about KDHE today instead of, well, I'd like the other part is what I'd really like. But, and if you want some of the other data, I think we asked for extra data to come to our committee, the questions we had. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I will mention to the members of the committee that we had a senator, I guess I can share her name, who's now our Commissioner for Insurance, Senator Schmidt, who was very good about always noting when a bill called for rules and regulations to put a date certain in that. And I think those of us on this committee can remember when we see legislation coming through that, to talk about what is a reasonable date to adopt these rules and regs. And I think because of that, Jill would also have that to report in her comprehensive report. But that's something that we can do individually to make sure that we've had that discussion with the agency, what time might it take, and make sure that we're part of it happening.
All right. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I
Take that
appreciate,
long.
thank you, Madam. I appreciate the conversation about the transparency aspect of this. I would also ask the committee or the chair about the accountability portion of it as well. Because if we, number one, get this type of data and transparency, what do we do with it? What are we empowered to do with it? Does this have to go back to both bodies to empower this committee to do something as far as having it as a driver to get a response or, carrot stick, whatever the case may be? Are we already empowered by statute to do that? Or are we just collecting data for collecting's sake?
I can tell you that we need to go back to the legislature and ask them to do it because we don't have the power to get the data unless they want to give it to us in particular. Okay? All right. Well, that was pretty easy. With nothing else coming before the committee, I want to thank everyone for being here. This meeting is closed.